Okay, you won't believe it. We're back again here at allpointstv.com on Monday, the 29th of August. We're getting to the end of the month, going into the fall, and schools are getting ready to open. I can imagine how many of the children are excited about that. The summer is coming to an end. We are never coming to an end. We're never coming to an end here. We're always going to be here on Mondays at 2 o'clock, and if we're not in town, out of the country somewhere, and doing other things, we will in fact tape ahead of time so that the program goes on anyway. I came to the studio today thinking I was going to give John a heads up on a book that I was told about, and I started reading it over the weekend. And I'll tell you that I should have known rather than trying to introduce a book to John, because every time I try to bring something to the table and think it's new, John's been there and done that. John's been there and done that already. And this book I thought I was going to bring to the studio and tell him about. He already had a copy of it and had it some years ago. But I want to tell you about it, and that is this book by Robert Greene. I've been reading it for the last couple of days. And folks, I got to tell you something. The book is called The 48 Laws, LAWS, The 48 Laws of Power, by Robert Greene. Greene is spelled Greene. And I have been reading this book for the last 2 days. Somebody told me about it and told me that I would really enjoy reading the book. And that's always the thing that pricks my attention, gets me focused. If you tell me I'm going to enjoy reading something, then I'm interested in it instantly. And I will tell you that this is one of the most profound books I've ever read. And if I've read this much, I'm in chapter 4 now. And I'm headed for, I really just started reading it yesterday. It's not a fast read, but this is the most profound book I've read. I've read a lot of profound writers, people that were able to bring information from a variety of sources to one place and then writing a coherent book around a whole lot of different interests, and people that had different experiences that are giving some examples of what happened to them. They can apply in the 48 laws of power. It is amazing, and I don't know what kind of mind. I don't have that kind of mind. I'm very linear, and to be able to bring all this information together and make it coherent as is in this book here, I'll tell you, I can hardly wait to get. I'm going to be running out of here after the program is over, and I'll be running out of here so I can get back to reading this book. I'm probably going to spend the rest of the day on it when I get back home. The program ended at 3 o'clock, so from I'll probably be back home about 4 o'clock. And I'll tell you, I'll probably be up half the night reading this book. I want to recommend it to you. I can guarantee if you're a reader, there is no way a reader is going to read this book by Robert Greene and not enjoy what they're reading, but it's going to take you some time because there's so much to think about in each page this guy has written, up in my experience to chapter 4. And I really have read each of the chapters twice. I had to go back and underscore it because I'm reading it for a friend too, who let me borrow his book. They always want me to read the book and then underscore it. So when they come behind me to read it for themselves, I've underscored the main points and took some of the work out of it for them. But what I benefit is I don't have to buy the book because I'm the cheapskate of all times. But I love books, and I can't buy all the books that I read. So, but this book I highly recommend. It's called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And I think as I read it, I think that that's what the rulers are using against us. And when I say rulers, I'm not talking about Joe Biden. Joe Biden couldn't employ the strategies in this book. But there are people, I can tell by what this book is talking about and what I see them doing and the practices I see them engaging in. I can tell you that the persons that are ruling these countries and ruling this country, and we are being ruled, whoever is in back of the ones that's out there in front, because they're not running it. the ones that are actually running the country from wherever they are behind, wherever scene they're hiding behind, they read this book. Because I can see from what I read up to this point, there's too much thematic sameness in the tactics I see them employing in the Corridors of Power and what this book is talking about. So they are aware of these 48 laws of power. They're using these laws of power against the people of this country, and I think it's being employed all over the world. Another, I'll say this also before I get into what I want to talk about, because I want to talk about this danger that we're in as a country and where this is going with the Donald Trump issue and this raid of something we had never seen before. The raid of a former president's home, we had never seen that happen before. And then to try to bring about the indictment of a former president, we've never seen that before. Even Richard Nixon did not face the possibility of an indictment once they made him step down. They wanted him out, but they did not want to make a claim against him once he had done that. And Trump has left office, and they have not finished with him yet. They intend some other things here, and we'll talk about that as we get through the program.
I don't know if you want to bring this. I was going to bring this up. What I heard, because I haven't been watching it too much, but when they did that raid on Trump's house down there in Florida, or compound, whatever it's called. But anyway, but it was the documents they see was actually formerly declassified documents. They was reclassified as classified, and now they're saying he violated something. They were not classified.
Okay, John. Let me ask you a question about that. Okay, I understand what you're saying. Okay, fine. You can say that to the American people, all you lackeys out there. I am not the choir.
Well, see, what I'm saying.
Wait a minute, John. I want to ask you a question.
All right.
So the president declassified it. Okay, who has the authority to reclassify it?
Another president, probably.
Really?
I don't know if I don't know how that works. I don't, because that's not spelled out in the Constitution, is it?
Yeah, it is. It is. But
okay.
but here's where it's spelled out. You see, it's everybody wants everything. Where the line is it on, and things of that sort. You have to look at not only the stated word, but you have to also look at the implications of it to get the total meaning. Now, I'm not going as far as Hamilton in saying that there are implied powers in the Constitution. The Constitution says what it means, and it says it in black and white. But the language, though, has implications behind that which is stated. It does not mean that you have implied powers. The powers are specific, Alexander Hamilton. They're not implied powers. I know everybody's saying that. You listen to me. You can say that they're implied powers, and you can also say that there is a living constitution. You can also say what Biden said. Biden has said that no amendment is absolute. The man made that comment. I'm not misquoting him here, but I want to tell this man that is Stalin talking. This is a fascist talking. Because if that is true, what he said, then the Constitution is just mere suggestions, which is how they are now taking it. That's why Napolitano wrote the book called The Constitution in Exile, because that's where it is right now. They simply pushed this document aside and decided that they're not going to follow it, and the law is what they say it is. And one person made a fraudulent slip and actually said that. He's not here now because he died either last year before last, but died recently. I'm talking about the Florida representative, L.C. Hastings, the man, by the way, who had been impeached as a federal judge and had been impeached and removed from office, and later on decided that what he's going to do is then join the impeachment party and become a part of them. And so he got impeached as a judge and then removed from office through the impeachment process. And then he came back as an elected official and then joined them and became a member of the House of Representatives to join the Vipers that threw him out. But he knew they were just as corrupt as he was. He came back as one of them, and he's on good standing there. He had important committee chairpersons, positions and things of that sort. I'm talking about Alcee Hastings. And the man said, and he was bragging about it. And you'd be surprised how many of them have not said this, but feel the same way. He said, the law is what we say it is. And that's exactly right.
That's the one that said that, because I remember that quote. That was a few years ago.
Yes, it was.
I remember saying it was during a debate, and he goes, well, the law is what we say it is.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I forgot who said it.
Yeah, Alcee Hastings. ALCEE Hastings. I heard him speak when he had been impeached and removed. And look, stop saying that the president needs to be impeached. Stop saying that. The president needs to be removed through impeachment, through the impeachment process. We don't need to have the president accused of anything. We need to have this man removed from power.
Talk about Biden, right?
Biden.
Okay, yeah.
And to be talking about, we need to see people say we need to impeach Biden. They got a whole thing on Facebook. I get it all the time because they know my politics. I'm out there every day, and they'll say impeach Joe Biden. I'm not talking about impeaching Joe Biden. I'm talking about removing Joe Biden. But I'm talking about removing him. The only way you can remove him is through the impeachment process. You cannot prosecute the president of the United States while he's in office. Because what particular corridor of power, with the separation of power, and there are 3 corridors of power, which corridor has more ante-up in the power scheme than the president has? None of them do. Each party has its own corridor of power. It cannot intervene in the corridor to which is not assigned by the Constitution.
Imagine if civics class and this whole thing was taught more and more in class instead of gender studies and all this other crap. How irritated people. The thing is that tools, people having that information would prevent bloodshed because they could be challenged as soon as they saw the rumblings of something like this going on.
John, that's why you think they're not teaching that.
That's exactly my point.
That's your point. See, that's why they're not teaching it. They want to have persons over here distracted with this nonsense. Absolute nonsense. There are 2 genders. Can you get over that? There's male and female. If you're born with this anatomy of a male, then if you got the male anatomy, then you're a male. You're not a female. If you were named because your father and your mother weren't confused at your birth, but that confusion later on when you came out and told them what you were, and they saw what you were when they went in that room at your birth and held you in the arm before you were able to speak. Now you're able to speak, and now you're talking to them about what the teacher told you, and that is that you were born in the wrong body. You need to have some of your body parts chopped off. So then you were named Sam, but you now think you're Susan. Now that's what they're doing today. They're talking. These are distractions.
See, I should have been born in Arizona because I hate winter. So I identify with being an Arizonian instead of.
If we could do that, wouldn't that be something that we could actually wheel ourselves into the state of mind we want to be in?
I identify with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. So if I write a check for $2 million for a new house, you have to accept it because I identify with being those 2 men.
I want to identify with anybody that got money because I don't have the money. If I can identify with somebody that has money and then become that, I'm going to do that. But I am not buying that you can wheel yourself into another design not intended for you, because Mother Nature's a dictatorship. You can say anything you want to, that you think you are a man in a woman's body. You are a product of both a male and a female, and you have both of those chromosomes in you.
I didn't send it to you. There was a molecular biologist and being interviewed. She was really, it was a real short segment, and she was so irritated about this transgender stuff. She goes, at the structure level, at the basic structure level of human existence, you're male or female. There's no way your identification, your psychological, it doesn't take away from the fact that if you left DNA at a crime scene, they wouldn't say, gee, this person identifies with being the opposite sex that we see them as. No, they just see as a male or female.
Yeah.
XY or XX, the chromosomes and other features. And so that's it.
You have your own DNA. And this idea that you go and start chopping on body parts in order to, in fact, resemble that which is in your mind, your imagination, where you imagine reimagining your identity is what you're doing. You know how they keep saying you want to reimagine yourself. Well, you can reimagine yourself within the boundaries of who you are. I reimagine myself when I was sitting in that classroom poor, and I reimagined myself. And I was imagining myself because I was dreaming in those classrooms with my eyes open. And I was dreaming about one day what I would become after I got out of the school, where I would not have to go back to that poverty I was coming from. And I was not going back. But I came out of it, but I was dreaming about how I was going to do it. I was in the classroom trying to work out a plan. And I knew I had to go through this person and that person on this level and that level and other levels. And I went to 3 different levels above the high school level to get to my goal. And so I understand you got to transcend some things, but you telling me that you're going to transcend gender. You know something? Nobody ever said that before 2000, not even in the land of Sodom and Gomorrah. They didn't say that over there. They weren't saying they were transcending anything. They were saying that Sodom and Gomorrah was people that were practicing sodomy there. And this idea that you can change your gender, that's a 20th century phenomenon there. I don't know of anything I read in any book where people were chopping on body parts in order to fit the design that's in their imagination.
Well, that actually didn't they have one person who was famous, the Richardson or whatever, became a female, a male became a female back in the 50s, 60s. The person went to one of the Scandinavian countries that have this process. I mean, they're willing to take that on.
Yeah, that I remember the case you're talking about. But when you were becoming a courtier, meaning that you're going to go into the court where the palace is located, you are a danger in the palace. And let me read this right here. Let me just kind of give you a peek of something in this book here.
Christina Jorgensen.
That's what it was. Right. Went to Sweden, right?
Yeah, went to Sweden. Yeah, went to.
Was that 70 something? No,
you didn't say. I didn't say
something.
It was like, it was actually, it's like 1950, in 1950s.
50, okay. Yeah, I remember the case. They couldn't have an abortion here and went to Sweden. Went to Sweden, right?
I believe it was Sweden.
Yeah, Sweden, in order to have it. Let me read from, I think I'm in chapter 1 of this book, the 48 Laws of Power. And you see, there's a certain decorum that you have to have if you're going to be a courtier, because you're inside of the power center. And by you being there, if you are too forward, if you seem like you're too much imbued with power, that is threatening. And so one of the points that Robert Greene makes, and when I read this, I was saying to myself, yeah, that's what happened between, if you want a more updated example of it, he gives a lot of examples of it in the book here. But never outshine the master, particularly if the master does not have a lot going for himself. That's you are a threat to that, to the person above you. You got to always be aware of how any forwardness is threatening. And there's a case of it, I'll give you the case here, but there's a case of it in terms of Saddam Hussein. This thing is at the table in Iraq, and Saddam Hussein announces a position. And there's a person sitting at the table that disagrees with that, with the president of Iraq. This is not talking about, raise your hand, how many of y'all agree with me? This is the stated position. The court, that's this. It's not, I don't agree. I have another point of view. clear your throat. I disagree. Disagree with what? So Saddam Hussein invites him to go into the room where he can discuss it further. And he go in there and hear a gunshot go off. And Saddam Hussein comes back to sit down. How many persons you think agreed with him at that point, even if they had solidly disagreed with him before? How many really raise their hand and say that they might have another view of how that goes? You always have to be aware that you cannot be seen as a threat to the one that's over the palace. Now, why did they chop off some body parts back in that time period? It wasn't because they were changing the agenda. They knew that if you were talking the soprano voice, nobody going to listen to you in the army. The eunuch was chopped before he gained, just like you take your pet, and you don't want them running away because they want to mate. So before he gets to that point, you get him before he has known that, and you neuter him. But you do it right after the wolf in the dog, so that he can still do the watchdog part. But you don't want him running out because he wants to mate with dogs. Or they pick up the scent and they want to go and do that. So you would neuter the dog. But the reason why they did that, and they would in fact neuter the eunuch, talking about the female eunuch. The female eunuch would not, well, that could be a danger too. Look what happened to Genghis Khan, who didn't make it through the night. How many persons read that book on Genghis Khan? When they locked the door with his mistress, and he never came out. You need to read this book. But here's one part of it that I have gotten through, and I had to go back through it again. I read every chapter twice when I'm getting some information that's very new, because I got to have some way of recalling where did I get it from. Maybe I can tell you what the chapter was I found it in. I'll read something to you about a modern example of it as well. But it says here, never outshine the master. You have to be very careful, because if you do that, then the person that is the master of that court sees you as a danger, because if you have that on the ball, then you are a threat. Let me tell you this right here. This is what you do if you outshine the person over you in a court. Listen careful, all you Malcolm X fans, because if you read that book by Benjamin Kareem, see, this is why those scholars of Malcolm X have told me. I had one of them, I won't call his name down in Detroit, told me that he resents the authority in which I speak. I'm a better reader than you are. And you can resent it all you want to. And you did have to say later on, when I made some other comments, you did say that nobody's ever said that before. But here's Malcolm X, for those persons that are the ones that read the autobiography of Malcolm X and became an expert in reading it. But you have not read Benjamin Kareem's book called Remembering Malcolm, where he says that Malcolm X would say, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us blah, 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 blah. And Benjamin Kareem, who was in the Nation of Islam at the same time Malcolm was, said that, and nobody knew better than Elijah Muhammad that was not true. But here's what Malcolm was doing, and he was not fooling anybody except the flock. He was not fooling Elijah Muhammad. He thought that he was. Listen to this right here in a chapter that's telling you to be careful about outshining the one that's over you in the court. He says, if your ideas are more creative than your master's, ascribe them to him. in as public a manner as possible. Make it clear that your advice is merely an echo of his advice. In other words, stroke the ego of the person. But what he doesn't say here, and he gives some great examples of everything he's talking about in this book. You have to read over here in the columns in this book here, the examples the man gives. But you got to be careful in laying it on too thick so that it loses its ability to give the credit to the one that runs the court, because they see it is extravagant praise as a cover-up and designed to hide the true intent. And that's what Malcolm didn't understand. See, the people actually thought that the Elijah Muhammad was telling Malcolm the things that Malcolm was talking about. What Malcolm was doing was saying the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that he was changing the teaching to something more secular than was intended. And Elijah Muhammad saw that. And he saw that Malcolm was dangerous.
You don't want to outshine your boss. You know, when you get your boss as a king, look at King David and Saul. I mean, King Saul.
Yeah.
King Saul's still in power. He, David started gaining more favor in the sight of the people around him, and Saul went basically crazy, tried to kill David. On several occasions.
Those intrigues need to be studied about that. That's where he gets a lot of his information from, those courtiers that you have there. Look at the person that thought. Look, did you get to the part about Galileo? Did you read the part about Galileo?
I mean, that book you're talking about?
Yeah, this book.
No, I haven't got to. I don't remember. I mean, that was like, that had to be like 2001 or 2002 when I
it's not that long. I think he came out in 1998 or so. Galileo, the great astronomer, was we had not yet had a place for the intellectuals, the artists, to make a living in their artwork and in their intellectual prowess. We had not yet found the inverse of the producer. The inverse of the producer is the intellectual, and one comes as a result of the other coming. Until you get the producer, you won't have the intellectual, because the intellectual needs to have leisure, and the leisure comes out of enough production going on to allow him to, in fact, just be a thinker. Look at the think tanks you have in the United States, for example. Those think tanks, that's what these universities are, by the way. They're not there to teach. The teaching is done by the underlings. What the professors are there to do is to think, and to put that thinking in writing and create other thoughts, expand upon thinking. That's their job. And they may put their name on the course, but your children are not being taught by those professors. Those professors are in those offices, and they're putting things down on paper for other scholars to read as they talk to each other. And can I say this without you getting mad?
Look at the word research. Some guy pointed this out to me. I thought he was a kind of a weird guy one time. I was talking. He goes, "It's research. It means it's already been found, and you have to search for it again."
That's exactly right.
Yep.
Researching and making other claims based upon the research too, because every person reading the same information will research it differently, because the conclusions they draw from it will be different, because the inferences will prick the consciousness of a thinker, so that the thinker will think of it differently than other things will, and they'll begin to exchange these ideas about it. I think John was saying before we started the program today, that when he was in college, he was actually sitting down after the class over with other people in the classroom, and they would have a conversation about what it was that the class had discussed during that class period. And they reminded me of Eric Fromm's book called The Have or To Be, because in that classroom, there are two kinds of students sitting in that classroom. One is the one that wants to have ownership, to own the information, the property thing to him or her. And so it's like, I know these things, I possess these things, these are the facts, it's in my mind, you can't take it from me, I know this, and so on and so forth. That's a person in the having mode. But there's another person in that classroom. I think I was in I was in both those modes in a way. The other one was the being mode, the one that starts a class at 8 o'clock in the morning. This is B.F. Skinner's idea of the half ought to be. And that is a mode where you're sitting in that same classroom and you're starting at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you're that person based on the information you have at that point. By 10 o'clock, when the class is over, you've been transformed somewhat in your thinking to be another person thought-wise when that class period is over, because you're being transformed by the new information and understanding that you have.
Like,
to have or to be.
When I was in psychology class, I was preparing for a class test, and it was a class on history and systems of psychology. You know, the behaviorist, the psychoanalytical, the client centered philosophies. And I was just jumping around doing the perusal because it was the final, and it just dawned on me: if you were just given those kind of one theory, and that's all you had to work in psychology, you would find a way of making it seem like that was appropriate coverage of answering the questions for people who had or the process they're undergoing. But then but there's another one that comes along, and you'd have to basically, I think you would probably find yourself taking a little bit, be more eclectic. It's taken from this one, taken from that approach. So basically, there are a lot of theories there, but they're very poorly supported by data. And you can. And the thing is, you can probably convince somebody your approach that they're sitting down talking to you, your approach is effective. But then if there's a possibility, if they had talked to somebody else to using a different approach, they might have the same kind of breakthrough or even maybe a better one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My writing, if I ever get this book published, I'm working on right now, and I'm having problems getting past a certain point, not because of the writing of it, but because I'm on Facebook every day. I think this is such a critical time in our history that I don't think we could take a lot of time off. And I'm on Facebook every day, but it's because and I'm not saying I'm all that, but it's because things are so critical in terms of what's happening to the country, which we all have to live in, and we have relatives here. And there's a responsibility that puts upon you, because you got to pass the gauntlet down to others who are coming after you. And I want to leave the country in as good a place as I found it, and hopefully I can make it better before I leave. Otherwise, what was the purpose of my being here? So I'm on Facebook every day, and it's not like I'm snapping my finger and writing these articles. I write the longest articles on Facebook. See, most of those writers, like the ones I read the ones on Breitbart. I like those. I'm a conservative, so I read. Though I just don't think that liberals have anything to teach me. That's my arrogance. That's my bias. I read conservative thinkers. I read Thomas Sowell. I read the one that taught. Well, one of the ones that taught him at the University of Chicago. What's that economist over there? The economist at Chicago University. Friedman. Yeah. Milton Friedman, who taught Thomas Sowell and didn't change him at that time. I think they had to resound for a while through him getting more experiences, because when Thomas Sowell took Milton Friedman's class, he was a Marxist. And it wasn't until he worked in government and then got a chance to look at how this is working out down here. You give him more power, we work in a much more operative way, with more power to enlarge upon what was in fact thought of as workable. He found out if that was in fact enlarged upon, you got more inefficiency built into it. Now he's ready to go back and listen to what he had learned under Friedman. There will be an effect, but it was not an immediate effect. But I read Milton Friedman, Free to Be. That's a very important work. I haven't read all of Thomas Sowell's book, but I read a major part of his work to know where he's coming from. And everything he's written, I don't know of anyone that has written anything to top it. The man is just an out of the box thinker. You have to give him credit for that. But given that background that I have reading conservative writers, I just cannot. I don't spend a lot of time. I have to be honest with you and just tell you up front. I don't read a lot of liberal writers. First of all, I don't think you can be honest and be a liberal, because if you shared with the viewers how you really think on the left, your books will not be seller. Can I say will not be profitable if you're trying to write to appeal to more than one audience, because the left does not read. You'd be surprised of how they don't have a lot of scholarship on the left, a lot of claims, a lot of emotionalism on the left, but there's not a whole lot of attack of scholarship. And I'm not talking necessarily in the university, but some of that is a problem also.
I think Jane
is so close man because of it.
I think Jane Fonda once said that she refused to read anything that was in opposition to what she already held, because she thinks that her position would be weakened.
That's right.
And I can understand that to some degree, but I read Nietzsche, and Nietzsche was very antithetical to Christian belief. And after a while looking at it, weighing in what he did and I examined his life, and I saw that he lived a sad life and died, not tragically, but pathetically. And I just look at what Christianity brought about, and that proof of the pudding is in the eating. But I mean, I can understand it. I can see where the other people get their mindsets from, coming from, even though if it's inadvertently connected to something like Nietzsche would have thought of or advocated. See, that's the thing, is a lot of stuff we hear ideas out there that we don't know the source of, and we embrace them because they resonate well with us at that point, but we don't know the way that person who was saying it or stated it, how their life ended up.
Yeah, I don't read on the left in order to further my understanding of anything, because I don't think they have anything to teach me on the left. I'm aware of the left and what the left writes and things of that sort, and I do read it for a different reason, just to be aware of what they're writing. I don't read it in order for them to teach me anything. I don't think they can teach me anything. And I know people think when I say that I'm being arrogant. It's not an arrogance I'm talking about here. I just don't think that there is enough of a wider lens that the left uses in its analysis of things that I can actually gain anything from it, because I've been there at that place already, trying to expand upon my understanding of things, and that takes another kind of conversation, other minded work, and it can't take this narrow thing that's in place on the left. I think everybody on the left is very narrowly guided.
Well, like Ray Charles
and biased to a fault.
Well, Tom Sumner told me this story. I think I'm giving the right person. Ray Charles one time said he was trying to be diplomatic about rap music. He goes, "I really don't care for it because that doesn't teach me anything." And I like the way he said that, because I mean, let's face it, he was a phenomenal performer himself, and he definitely. I don't know if this music taught me anything, but I certainly liked it, Yeah. But I mean, I just don't get that feeling from. I just thought that was a very diplomatic, but still kind of succinct way of putting it. It doesn't teach me anything.
Ray Charles was the kind of person that I'll say this in the future in running, that Ray Charles was the kind of person that they couldn't understand why a person that was a soul singer would go into country music. And trying to understand, what is that about? And Ray Charles was saying he loved the stories that it told. He loved country music because of the stories that country music told.
Charlie Pride was a great singer.
Yeah, and they also got on his case because there was a black man over there with that twang, singing, Charlie Pride singing out of the side of his mouth and sounding like some of those singers. I'm out of Birmingham, so what do I know? I like all of it, because the black station used to go off earlier than the white station. They were segregated, but I liked all of it. So when the black stations closed down at 6, I can name some of the stations that they had at that time. And when they closed down at 6, I tuned to other stations and listened to the others. I enjoyed just as much. That's where I discovered Elvis. I like Elvis. I tune Elvis in now on YouTube.
He had a very similar. I mean, they always make a big deal about Bill Clinton being the first black president because he was raised by a single mom and all this stuff. Well, Elvis had both mom and dad around him, but they were desperately poor and living in Mississippi and all that. I think there's a lot of parallel connections to a lot of the blacks that came out of the South that I met. They were desperately poor. They came here. They got good jobs. Elvis had talent, resonated. They made him millions. I could see there's a definite parallel. You know, I think he was more
Yeah.
more likable for probably a lot of blacks, a lot of whites probably wouldn't understand the connection. You know,
It was they can say what they want to. Elvis Presley was a big hit in the black community in the South. When Elvis came on, you know, they had him on there on the Tommy Dorsey show, and Tommy Dorsey show would lead into Jackie Gleason's program. So Jackie Gleason, producing both of them, would have Elvis come on at the end of Tommy Dorsey's show. Who wanted to listen to that orchestra music? But they have Elvis on there at the end, and by watching at the end, then you're sitting there watching that at the end of the program. Then Jackie Gleason comes on, and then you're leading into Jackie Gleason. They used Elvis. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of history to be said about that. But you got to be very careful. When you're dealing with power, you got to be very careful in terms of being a courtier. And there are a lot of people who tried different ways to manipulate power to their advantage, not knowing that the manipulation will be viewed as that, or it would be exposure of the being too drunk and imbued with the exercise of power, so that they see you before you get to the top, they see you coming up. You know, that one, I think that in some way, Lawrence Peter wrote two very valuable books. The Peter Principle was the first that I came in contact with in reading the Peter Principle. And he was talking about how you do a good job at a certain level, and then because you did a good job there, you know, somebody comes and see the job you did and want to reward you because they can use you even more advantageously to the business if you're working at another level and able to deal with that level which you did below and make the company even more productive. But he said, but there'll become a time in terms of doing a good job at different levels that there'll come a point in which your level of incompetence will be in reach, in which the person then doesn't get elevated beyond that point. And that person there is in that position where he's incompetent until his career comes to a close. So everybody writing Dr. Peterson is saying, well, what's the antidote to that? And so he wrote a book called The Peter Prescription. And it was a pretty good line that he wrote. Basically what he was saying was, what you do if you find a person having reached that level of incompetence, what you do is you return him then down to the level where he's last competent, and then let him stay there where he's doing a good job. But rather than let him stay where he was incompetent and let him go on from there for another 15 to 20 years. So return him to the level of competence and let him finish out his career there. This is a pretty good prescription. But what Green is saying, this is very, very instructive. I was talking about, I was mentioning, John, I was talking about this before I got into some other conversations, but I was talking about Galileo. You know, we are definitely getting dumber. We are now going back to the earth is flat. That's how dumb, this how much they're dumbing down the society. We put that to bed in 1492. That's going on 600 years ago. That discussion is over. Just like this discussion about Gem, that stuff is over. They've been working on that stuff forever. I now see what they were doing to us on a lesser scale when I was in school when they had the Dick and Jane books. It couldn't have been, why couldn't it have been Richard and Jane? What were they telling us in that book? What was the Wilson Bryan Key here? What was this subliminal messaging in that Dick and Jane book? And why did they use that word when we were coming up as kids? And you say the Dick and Jane books. What was that about? It's about they're not starting where they are now. They're starting here, and it's where we are now, based upon that starting point. Some years ago, this has been a what do you call it? Generational. This has been a generational movement. You know, where you move incrementally as you have a view of the goal. You see, when you're, it's like in the Kikuyu culture in Africa, that it may not be that you be the one to touch the lion as long as each person does that his or her part well. And so you might not spear the lion, but you might be the one that gets him to run into the net, the one that's killing off the cows and things like that. You got to get him because he's destroying the wealth of the tribe. So in the Kikuyu, they say that it does not matter which one actually spears the lion, as long as each party out there searching for the lion does his part. Because beating those drums and that and running him from one part to the other, they got something for him somewhere else. You may not be located at where they're running him to. You may not run in the direction where you are. But you did your part over there where you were, and that was instrumental in the eventual ending point of that threat that lion poses to those cattle out there, where they measure their wealth by how many cows they have. In fact, when they have the dowry and they're getting married, that's going to figure into whether or not the marriage can go on. Because you cannot, in fact, through the dowry, take, and where the dowry comes from, Stone's book, right? Where the dowry comes from is that you're taking a worker out of the family, and we're not talking about machines here. You take a worker out of the family, the dowry is replaced the wealth that's been lost in that. And so the cows that you're giving is the gift back to the family that's given something of value from them to you. And the dowry is to return some of the wealth, some of the materiality that's lost by taking the woman out of the family and putting her in another family, because she becomes a part of the family that she is now joined. You know, you see that in terms. Well, I'm getting too far off my subject, but I will tell you that there are a lot of different parts of it. Now, let me go back to what I was before, because I haven't gotten to Galileo. I want to tell you about what happened to Galileo. Galileo this is in the, I think the 1500s, the 1500s. This is before you had the man of production found. Didn't have the man of production. You had the man of force, and the man of force had his army, and he would then get enough power to go down there and take the wealth from another country that did not have his army up to speed and just take the loot back, and then the loot is part of the loot of that state that it reached that state, because the army went down there and confiscated the wealth, and then left a note there saying every year send up this much here to keep the army from coming back. That's how you did it. So a lot of these persons that, like Galileo, genius in that, they're out there with all this information, but they're out there as paupers. They don't have any money. Anybody paying them for that. So here's Galileo in the book called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And he's out there doing all these inventions. And what he would do is he would send him the telescope. He made up a compass, a gravitational compass, and that was intriguing and all that, and give these things out. And they would give him some gift, no cash. And so Galileo was trying to figure out a way, a non-threatening way, that would enhance his value to the court so that the court would see a need to further reward him and so on and so forth. And he did it with the Medici family. You know, Medici family was a very famous family in Europe. Certain popes coming out of there, certain kings and queens of different countries in Europe because of the Medicis. So Cosimo, I think that would be the way you pronounce it, the first of the line of that Medici line, he just, when he did the discovery through one of his telescopes, he gave the telescope to Cassino's son. By the time the son had ascended to the throne. But Galileo decided that he is going to now find a way to enhance his value to the leader of the Medicis. And the way he did that was to, after have discovered the 4 moons around Jupiter, he decided that discovery he made, since that was the symbol of the family, he's going to make some use of that. And because Cosimo the First had 4 sons, Cosimo the Second, who was in power at that point, had 3 brothers, he decides the 4 moons would have, in fact, foreordained the ascendancy of that line, and those 4 moons were reflective of that family, the Medici family, and they now have authentication of the reign here that's honored and foreordained and predicted from the stars that further legitimizes that dynasty, and that was of some value to them to have it authenticated from the heavens. And that's how he was able to endure himself to the family. And that's how he began to become well ordained in his work. That's how he got some of his work done, because now he has enough wherewithal to live off of the scientific wherewithal that he had. But they were not making a lot of money in the scholarly world at that point. The producer is the flip side of the intellectual. Without the producer having been invented and brought on the scene, if it had just remained the man of force and the man of superstition, which is what Ayn Rand is talking about, if it just remained those two, the flip side of each other there, the man of force and the man of superstition, that kept people cowed down through stuff like coronavirus and things of that sort. I mean, that's not new. They've been using that forever, keeping people cowed down. You can call it viruses now. They call it demons back in the time period. Same thing. They're still using that. And some of y'all ran in there with multiple this and multiple that, boosters and all that crazy stuff you got involved in, because they know they can use fear. But until you have the intellectual, you can't have the intellectual until you have the man of production on the scene. And that's why when the man of production came on the scene and was able to produce, now you're generating wealth, and the wealth now can have courtiers like Galileo and other smart people around the court, and they can be there, and their production is their mind producing, not in materiality, but they are doing things in terms of space in between the ears. Without the producer, you don't have the intellectual. And that's what Ayn Rand is saying, and she's exactly right about that. You have to. So I look at Robert Greene's book, and I'll tell you something. It's a book you need to read. It's a book you need to have in your library, whether you read it or not. Read the first chapter of the book. I guarantee you, once you start reading, you're not going to put it down anytime soon. You might not finish it because, like, I think I counted 400 and some odd pages in it. 400 and some odd pages in the book. You might not read the whole book. It'll be enough to chew on. As Dr. Martin used to tell me all the time, all the time, man, you need to chew on it. You might not be able to chew on the whole book. It's enough to chew on in the first chapter. And every chapter gives you a lot to chew on. And I'll tell you